side, but got it. Okay, but the students may perceive assessment negatively. Okay, and even more worryingly is that this picture gains a lot of, I would say, popularity in our social media platforms, perhaps because people can actually relate to the feelings of the fish. Okay, they understand how the fish feels during this assessment. They can perhaps they say that what the fish experienced during this assessment is the same as their experience during their assessment at schools. So this tells you something about assessment that we need to be very careful about, okay? Okay, next. This is the second component of the slide. We look at the approaches to assessment. So the first thing that assessment gets confused is between assessment and evaluation. So this is the second type. This is the second thing that assessment gets really confusing. Okay, there are three approaches to assessment. First, you can look at assessment through assessment of learning. So this is the first approach. The second approach is assessment for learning. And the third approach is assessment as learning. Okay, so the first is of, the second is for, the third is as. Okay, the first assessment of learning, it is pretty much summative. And it is also the most dominant approach to assessment, meaning that you see this very frequently at schools. Okay, and the assessment is mostly done at the end of a task, a unit of a work, meaning that the students will learn first about something and then they will be assessed at the end of it. Okay, and the results of the assessment are expressed symbolically, meaning that they are grades, they are marks. Okay, and most importantly, assessment of learning, it aims at making comparison. Okay, comparison with what? Comparison with the other students. How does this student perform in comparison to his or her other friends? Okay, and assessment of learning is commonly the lack of feedback, meaning that if the students get a B or get a C, teachers most likely will not provide feedback after that. Why did he or she get a B or a C? Okay, and I think the most worrying part of assessment of learning is it's very high stake. What it means by very high stake is that it has people see it very highly. Usually, the examples of assessment of learning includes a national standard assessment, where everyone will have the same exam papers. The students will answer the same questions, and it becomes sort of like an entrance exam to the university. So it's very high stake. It comes with pressure. Okay. And then let's look at the second approach to assessment for learning. So previously it's summative, but right now it's formative, and it is also interactive. Why it is interactive? Because this is where the teachers start sitting side by side with the students. Okay, assessment for learning is the point where teachers begin to adopt back the original meaning of assessment, the one that we looked at earlier in earlier slide, where the teacher sits side by side with the students. Okay, and instead of doing the assessment at the end of the learning, the assessment is actually done during the learning, in the middle of the learning. Okay, not at the end. And the marking or the results of the assessment for learning is not to compare, or is not to compare the student's grade with another student's grade, but is to highlight that specific student's strengths and weaknesses. And most importantly, the good part of assessment for learning is that it provides constructive feedback, meaning that the students are being graded. However, the teachers will go back to the students and tell him or her on which part of it that they should improve on, okay, and how they should improve on that specific part of the topic, okay? And the last approach to assessment is assessment as learning. And assessment as learning is very advanced. It's a very advanced approach to assessment where the students become the assessor to assess themselves. Okay, so here the teachers teach the students on how to review themselves, on how to become critical about their progress, to become very aware of their own learning, whether they have achieved the learning outcomes or not, or whether they should be more, would say they should be working hard on certain aspect of the topic. So assessment as learning highlights more on students, okay? Now let's look at the next slide. Okay, so approaches to assessment. Again, we have the three approaches: assessment of, assessment for, and assessment as. So they have different purposes. So the first assessment of learning is to judge about placement, promotion, and credentials. Okay, that's why we have our national examination so that everyone can sit with the same questions, and they will be graded with a similar system so that they can move further, so they can get the minimum credentials to get into universities or other higher education institutions. And the reference points, meaning that the comparisons made is comparisons against other students, okay? And the assessor is the teacher. The second approach is assessment for learning. So the purpose is to gather information so that the teachers can decide on how to improve their instructions, okay, their teaching, on which part of the teaching should be improved. So the reference points can be external standards or expectations. And again, the assessor is on the teacher, is the teacher, him or herself. And the last one is assessment as learning, where the purpose of it is to self-monitor and self-correct, self-adjust. Pretty much it values what we usually refer as a self-directed, okay? Self-directed learning. So reference points would be personal goals and external standards, and the key assessor is the student. All right. Okay, now, as a teacher, what you should do during assessment? Okay, teacher can play various roles during assessment. You can either be a mentor, you can be a guide, you can be an accountant, you can be a reporter, or you can be a program director. So as a mentor, you have to provide constructive feedback and support to each student depending on the needs, okay? Teacher, as a guide, you collect diagnostic information so that you can lead your students, you can help the students through the assignments and the work at hand. Teacher, as accountant, where you keep all the assessment results and all the students' progress and their achievement. Reporter is when you report the results of your assessment, either to parents, to students themselves, to school admin, or perhaps to the ministry, to district level office, okay? And the last one, teacher as program director, where you have to make adjustments to your teaching, to your instruction, depending on the results of the assessment, okay? Now, oops. Okay, this is the famous pyramid. I think that every teacher should know. The first pyramid is the traditional assessment pyramid, okay? We have the lowest part of it, which is assessment of learning. The lowest part of it is also the biggest, okay, the widest base, meaning that assessment of learning is still much dominant in the traditional pyramid. And as we go up, we have 4 and S learning. However, we are starting to look at assessment differently, and we are starting to reconstruct the pyramid, the assessment pyramid. We are looking at putting assessment as learning at the bottom of the pyramid so that it has the widest base and it has more emphasis during teaching and learning. And as we go up, it becomes 4 and up. All right? So the students become the key assessors. And as we go up, teacher will take place as the key assessors. Okay, these are several types of assessment. There are many more types of assessment that that are being discussed in the existing literature. However, I select and I pick the ones that I would say relevant to the context of primary and elementary education. So the first one is formative assessment. Okay, formative assessment is an integral part of teaching and learning. It does not contribute to the final mark given for the module. Instead, it contributes to learning through providing feedback. So formative assessment, it pretty much focuses on getting the students know what they did right and what they did wrong, all right? And how they should improve on the deficiency, on which part, on which weaknesses, okay? It should indicate what is good about a piece of work and why this is good, and it should also indicate what is not so good and how the work could be improved. Effective formative feedback will affect what the student and the teacher does next. Okay, this is the first type of assessment, which is formative assessment. The second type of assessment is summative assessment. A summative assessment demonstrates the extent of a learner's success in meeting the assessment criteria in accordance to the intended learning outcomes, and it contributes to the final mark given for each student. Okay, it is normally used at the end of a unit of teaching, and summative assessment is used to quantify achievement. Okay, it gives labels, it gives symbols, okay, to reward achievement, to provide data for selection, and for comparison against the standard or benchmark. So for all these reasons, summative assessment must have a very high credibility and validity as well as reliability, because summative assessment is, again, is very high stakes. It gives pressure not just to the students, it gives pressure to the teachers to perform. It gives pressure to parents, whether the kids are doing well during exam, okay? So that's why summative assessment, if done well, it gives a very high level of satisfaction. But if it is not done well, people will start to criticize the summative assessment, whether it is specifically tailored to each student's needs, okay? Now, next slide. So the next slide is authentic or work integrated assessment. So this is an assessment where the tasks and conditions are more closely aligned to what you would experience within employment. So the assessment is, it assesses skills or knowledge that are pertinent to you to prepare you for your workplace, to prepare you for your workforce. So it may not be relevant to primary school students. Perhaps it's more relevant to secondary or college students. So authentic or work integrated assessment, it's more on that student cohort. Okay, it develops student skills and competency alongside academic development. Diagnostic assessment, it's pretty much similar to formative assessment, just that diagnostic assessment, you would like to identify, you would like to detect problems ahead before you start your class. You want to know What are the potential problems that may arise before you start your lessons? So it is often used before teaching or when a problem arises. If, for example, you would like to start teaching about a topic on of photosynthesis, perhaps. So before you start teaching, you give out some working sheets, okay, just to assess the prior knowledge that the students have about photosynthesis. So from this diagnostic assessment, you may find that some students are excellent. They already know what is photosynthesis. Some students, they may know, but they have a slight misunderstanding about photosynthesis. And you may also know that some students may know nothing about photosynthesis, or perhaps they know what is photosynthesis, but they do not actually describe it in a scientific way. Okay, so that's diagnostic assessment. Now, the last type of assessment is ipsative assessment. Ipsative assessment is gaining popularity in these recent years because it's designed to assess the student's progress or achievement against her or his own previous standards. Okay, it can measure how well a particular task has been undertaken against the student's average attainment, against their best work, against their most recent piece of work. So ipsative assessment tends to correlate with effort, to promote effort-based attributions and to enhance motivation to learn, meaning that ipsative assessment is very personalized. Okay, if the students, let's just discuss one example. Okay, student A is a very excellent student. So her common standards would be an A plus for all science-related subjects. So that's student A. So how to assess her against her best work? Okay, but then for student B, he or she may not have the best understanding about science-related subjects. So his or her performance might be inconsistent, there are ups and downs. So how in a way that we have to assess student B so that it improves, or we know whether he or she is improving or is going backwards. Okay, it's very personalized to each student. How we assess students A will pretty much be similar to how we assess students B. But since each student have different standards, okay, each students have different expectations, so that may vary. The results of the assessment may vary between students, okay? Now, this is another, I would say, popular topic that people usually ask when we discuss about assessment. The first one is when they will ask about how is assessment different from evaluation. Okay. The second one is when they would ask about the approaches, the common approaches to assessment. So we have the three. We have as, for, and of. Okay. And this is the third point, where they will ask you on how is formative and summative assessment different from each other. So formative assessment, it is a form of evaluation. Okay, I wouldn't use the word evaluation. Pretty much it's an assessment during learning, and it monitors learning process. It improves learning through constructive ongoing feedback, and it focuses on learning goals, and it covers a smaller content areas. But when it comes to summative assessment, it is done after learning. It has ranks, it has grades, it has symbols. It evaluates achievement, and it is a comparison through standardized tests. It focuses on results, not goals. and it includes the entire course. So it assesses more components of the learning contents. Okay, this is the third component that we are going to cover in this slide, which is what is quality classroom assessment. Okay, quality classroom assessment is designed to serve the specific needs of each student. So each student have different learning needs. So a quality assessment would cater to each student. Okay. The second one is they are based on clearly articulated and appropriate achievement targets. A quality assessment should be made or designed to help students in achieving their targets. The third one is they accurately measure student achievement. Okay. The fourth one is they yield results that are effectively communicated to their students. Okay, quality assessment without feedback is pretty much not effective. Okay, an assessment should result in a feedback where the feedback should be communicated to the students. The students should be able to understand the feedback that is given by their teachers so that they can improve on their learning. Okay, and finally, a quality assessment involves students. Okay? In self-assessment, the students will set their own goals. The students will track and reflect on their own learning as well as they share their learning experiences with their friends. Okay. Okay. These are the 5 keys to effective quality assessment. It has clear purpose. It has clear targets. It has sound assessment design. It has effective communication, and lastly, it has student involvement. Okay, now let's explore each key, each feature of quality assessment. So the first one is clear purpose. Okay, the purpose of assessment, okay, every teacher and educator should understand that assessment is to gather information about student learning. Okay, so this information will help to inform and guide the teachers on which aspect of instructions that they should improve on. Okay, so an assessment does not stop at gathering information from or about the students. It should also lead to a change in instruction. The second one is assessment need regular information about what each student has and has not yet learned. Okay, so each student, they learn at different pace. Each student, they learn differently and they have different, I would say, learning speed. Okay, some are very fast, some are quite slow, but that does not mean that we need to, I would say, we need to sideline any student. Okay, we need to consider all students, and because of that, each student will have its own unique pattern. Okay, so the assessment also decide what comes next. Okay, what comes after assessment? Okay, so once we diagnose there are problems with the students' learning processes, what would happen next? Okay, so that's the purpose of assessment. And the last one is the assessment should support student learning. In simple words, assessment should help the students to learn more. What does it mean by more? So in this way, assessment should help the students to learn more effectively. Okay. Now, next slide. Okay, the second key feature of a quality classroom assessment is to have a clear target. Okay, now the teacher should start the assessment with a clear sense of the learning to be assessed, the achievement expectations we hold for our students, and the content standards at the focus of instruction. meaning that the assessment should be designed according to the achievement expectations, as well as the standards that we have in our national documents. Okay. Next, when our learning targets are clear to us as teachers, the next step is to ensure they are also clear to our students. Okay, as teachers, it is very easy. It is very simple for us to understand what are the standards, what are the national standards or targets that are being indicated for each of our subject, for each of our classroom. Okay, but it is not that clear for our students. Our students are not aware about what we expect from them. So we need to communicate that. We need to make sure that the students are also clear about the targets that we are setting upon them. Okay, and the students' chances of success improve when they start out with a vision of where they are headed. So when the students know the directions of their learning, they know their, what we call it, their final stop at their learning journey. So they will have a better chance. Okay, they will have a better opportunity to gain success because they have a clear vision along the road. Okay, they have a clear vision on what to do next, on what to improve on. Okay, because they know where they are going. Right. This is how we set up targets. Okay. So in the second key feature, which is to have a clear target, there are various types of targets that the teachers can set. So the first one is knowledge. So knowledge is where the teachers focus the targets on factual information, procedural knowledge, conceptual understandings. The second type of targets is reasoning. So reasoning focuses more on the thought processes, how the students are able to think, how the students are able to organize their thinking. That is reasoning targets. The third targets are skill. Skill meaning that it is more physical skill-based performance, a demonstration. Perhaps skill targets are more relevant to physical education. Okay. Product targets is a type of target that focuses on creation of a product. So perhaps it's a module, perhaps a portfolio, a product of a book, of a mini book, a scratch book. Okay. And the last type of target is disposition targets. So disposition targets, it refer to attitudes, motivations, and interests, more on the psychological aspect of the learning. Okay. So there are different targets that the teachers can set up so that the assessment is more targeted at each student's learning needs. Okay, this is a very helpful flowchart to help teachers on how to make sure that their assessment is guided by a clear standards or clear targets. Okay, first the teacher should read. They should read the common standard, the national standard that is being set by ministries. Okay, and then the teacher can either agree or don't agree. Of course, as a teacher, you can always, if you don't agree, you can always add on to other things during the classroom itself. And then you can help yourself by going through the flowchart. You can determine the overall type of standard, the one that I have just presented, whether it's on knowledge, whether it's on reasoning, whether it's performance-based, skills-based, or product-based. And then you have to know on which targets that are relevant. That are relevant for your students, that are relevant for your class. Sometimes you may want to focus on knowledge. You may want to focus on skills. or you want to combine the targets. It all depends on you as teachers, but the decision that you made, whether it's a combination or it's a single target, you have to make it, you have to cater it to your students. You need to have a discussion with your students. Okay. Now let's look. Okay, while engaged in this step, if a target is at the knowledge level, all underlying targets will be at the knowledge level. So there will be no reasoning skill or product components. And this is where what I'm saying. You can either have it singly done, meaning that you can only focus on knowledge, or you can only focus on each aspect. But if you want to go beyond that, you want to combine, it's okay, but you have to know your students' abilities. You need to know whether your students can go for it. Okay? Reasoning targets will have knowledge components, but they do not require skill or product components. Skill targets always have knowledge underpinnings. They usually require reasoning as well. Product targets will require knowledge and reasoning, and in some cases, might be underpinned by skill targets as well. So this is a very good flow chart, okay, because it already tells you which type of standard or which type of targets that work well with each other. Okay, it tells you that you can go for K only. It tells you that if you want to integrate K and knowledge and reasoning, that will be very good. If you like to integrate knowledge, reasoning, and skills, that will be better. And the last one, you can either integrate knowledge, reasoning, skills, or perhaps performance. Okay. And if once you set the target, you need to know whether the students can move towards mastering all the targets. Okay, if your students are able, have the abilities, have the capacity to achieve the targets that you're being set, so that will be very good. Okay, now this is I would say the third aspect of a quality classroom assessment is to have a sound design. So selecting an assessment method should reflect the intended target, okay, the one that we previously discussed. After we have chosen a method, we develop it with attention to 3 other quality criteria. Must sample well by including just enough exercises to lead to confident conclusions about student achievement, and must build the assessment of high quality items, tasks, exercises, and every assessment situation brings with its own list of things that can go wrong and that can bias the results. So in this third feature, sound assessment design, the teacher is a little bit, I would say, a little bit occupied, because this is the moment where the teachers have to decide on whether to disseminate disseminate tasks or have it exercises and having scoring schemes. This is when the teacher is designing the assessment. What type of questions that would be included in the assessment? What kind of observations that we like to assess? And as a teacher, you should also know that what may go wrong with your selection, with your decision. What may go wrong with this type of questions? Are there going to be biases? Will this bias cause the results of your assessment to be inaccurate? So this is quite a mind-boggling stage, but it's okay. Let's go to the next slide where I give you, I would say, an example on how to best design an assessment. So the fourth one is an effective communication. So assessment results must be communicated to the students in a timely and understandable manner. So this is very important, because sometimes when teachers assess the results of the assessment is not being communicated to the students in a timely manner, meaning that there's an extended period of time between the assessment and the feedback. Okay, and sometimes when the teachers discuss the results of the assessment with the students are not able to understand the feedback because perhaps there's a language barrier, perhaps the teachers are using advanced terms, the students are not being able to understand it right away. Okay, so there's a lot of things that can go wrong when you are communicating the results of assessment to students. The second one is communication of formative assessment. Information provides the kind of descriptive feedback learners need to grow. And communication in a summative assessment leaves all recipients understanding the sufficiency of student learning, such as when we convert summative into grades, that accurately reflect achievement at a point in time. So these two boxes tells you that in summative assessment, it's very clear. The students can know whether they get an A, they get an B, so it's very clear. It's symbolized. But when it comes to formative assessment, the teacher needs to sit side by side with the students and help the learners grow depending on the feedback given. Okay. Now, student involvement. Students decide whether the learning is worth the effort required to attain it, and students will have their own decision whether they want, whether they believe that they are capable of reaching the targets. Students decide whether they keep learning or to quit working, so that's a very dangerous stage. It is only when students make these decisions in the affirmative that our instruction can benefit their learning. Okay, this is the keys, all the 5 keys to quality classroom assessment. We've discussed on clear purpose, clear targets, sound design, effective communication, student involvement. Okay, so this is a figure to summarize everything that we've learned about the keys to quality classroom assessment. Now, there are many different assessment methods. So we can group them into 4 large groups. The first group is selected response assessment. The second one is written assessment. The third one is performance assessment. And the fourth is personal communication. So let's go one by one, right? Okay, so selected response assessment, you can either have multiple choice, true or false, matching, or you can have it in fill in the blank. So there are many ways to employ these different items. And for example, when we are talking about multiple choice, when the teacher is using multiple choice questions. So when is the best time to use multiple choice question is when there is only one right answer and there are several possible alternatives to the correct answer. Okay, and the advantage of having multiple choice is that you can measure variety of objectives, it's easy to score, and it's covered lots of material. But there are limitations in each type of these questions. For example, in multiple choice questions, students can actually guess, and that student has a 33% chance. Okay, depending on the number of answers given, the students will have a certain statistical percentage chance to get it correct without even doing much thinking about it. Okay, so that's selected response assessment. And okay, this is some examples on designing selected response assessment. For example, you have to make sure that the wording of the questions are simple and focused. Okay, you must make sure that the language that is being used is at the lowest possible reading level, because you don't want your students to get confused or to not be able to understand the question because of language barriers, because of language issues. Okay, that's not good, because you are not examining the language. If you are not teaching language subjects, you are not assessing their language, but you want to assess their mastery in terms of the content knowledge. Okay, so the right way of designing that question would be, what are the poles of a magnet called? So this is the multiple choice questions. There are 4, A, B, C, D. However, the not so good example is when the teachers design an open-ended question. Okay, because that's not that will be that's not going to be specific in answering what are the poles of magnet. Okay. Okay, so these are other several guides that you can use to design questions. But do not make the correct answer obvious to students who have not studied the material. Highlight critical, easily overlooked words. Sometimes when we see questions, there are terms, not, most, least, etc. So we need to highlight this. Okay, highlight these critical words, and before we disseminate or before we give the questions to our students, let's have a click to read your questions first, so that they can give you a feedback on how to improve the questions, on whether your questions are appropriate to your students. And the last one is to double check the scoring key for accuracy before scoring. Okay, so this is written assessment. Okay, written assessment can either exist in different forms, but I highlight 2, short answer and a standard written response. Okay, short answer will be something that is very, I would say, not that lengthy. For example, you can use the word describe, you can use the word list, you can use what will happen, why will that happen. A standard written response is more of an essay. It is a little bit elaborative in comparison to short answer. Okay, you can use the word explain, you can use the word interpret. Okay. And another thing about the 2 is that in short answer, usually you have to quantify. You have to quantify how many answers do you want. Okay, so you have 2 differences here, 3 causes, but in a standard written response, usually you only provide what aspects of the topic that you would like the students to write about. Okay. Okay, this is a quality guideline on how best to write, to design a written assessment. Okay, you can look at the quality of the items. There are many questions that you can read to help you design a good written item for written assessment. Next, you need to assess the quality of the scoring guide. So how do you score, or how do you grade a written assessment? Okay, and then you need to also consider different different ways of scoring. Okay, the third assessment method is performance. Okay, performance, you can either assess the skills of the students. So here you can ask them to demonstrate, to play a musical instrument, to carry out steps in a scientific experiment, to speak a foreign language perhaps, to read aloud, to repair an engine, or to work in a group. So those are skill targets. Okay, performance assessment that are reflecting skill targets. So the second performance assessment that reflect product targets, you can assess on students' term paper, you can assess their lab reports, their works of art, their workshop creation. Okay, those are product targets. Okay, now designing a good performance-based assessment, you can always remember RAFTS, RAFTS. R for roles, A for audience, F for format, T for topic, and S is using a very strong verb, okay? Okay, this is an example on how to use graphs to design a performance-based assessment. Okay, for example, your assessment would be in a report to be read by fifth graders, explain 3 or more habits they can establish now to help them become healthy adults. So in framing your report, consider the following questions. Okay, you have all these different questions and use the graphs that are role. Well-informed older student, audience would be fifth graders. Okay, format would be report, topic would be health habits. Okay, just reflect back on this statement on assignment. And then purpose is to teach and inform. Okay, so your report or your assessment should be judged on the attached criteria. Okay. The last assessment method is on personal communication. This is where you want to assess how your students' ability to communicate. Okay, for example, you can ask questions during your teaching and learning. You can interview students. You can listen to students as they participate or discuss in the class. You can give oral examinations. You can have students keep journals or logs. Okay. Now, in personal communication assessment, there are different types of format that you can use, okay, or types. And they are instructional questions, class discussions, conference and interviews, oral examination, journals and logs. So each of these format, they have their own primary use and they have their own target types. Okay. So you can have knowledge targets or reasoning targets, or you can have skill targets. Okay. Okay, this is how you would like to conduct a personal communication assessment in class. So you can ask questions to encourage or to require a student summarize or provide key points during class. Okay. So you encourage students to interact with each other and then model the response patterns. For example, you try to teach the students on how to identify certain patterns of reasoning or certain patterns of thought arrangement, so that they can effectively deliver what they understand about a certain topic. Okay. Okay, and this blue boxes is how you can best adopt a personal communication assessment. For example, if you provide a topic, okay, so when you express that certain kind of topic, so that topic will help the students to explore certain ideas about it and help them to understand that this is how they should be thinking. This is how the thought processes is. For example, you can always say, I sometimes wonder, okay, this encourages the students to explore the topic rather than to provide a single quick answer, okay? And sometimes it's effective. Sometimes it helps if you say that you do not have the answer to that question that you are asking, because that will help the students to talk more. What do they think about the topic that I'm going to teach? What do they think about the topic that we are learning about? Okay, so that will help students to not provide a short answer, but will help students to be more elaborative in their answers to your questions. Okay. Okay, now how do you choose an assessment method that reflects the target? Okay, so we have the different targets. We have the knowledge targets, we have the skills target, we have reasoning target. So which type of assessment method is the best for each target? Okay, so this is a very good table from Stiggins and Chap. So according to them, if you are looking at knowledge target, so the most appropriate assessment method would either be written response or personal communication. Okay, and Striggins and Chap also provide some rationales behind it, some justifications behind it. You can always go back to this slide and look at it. Okay. Now, that is one way of making sure that the assessment method actually reflects the targets. So another way of ensuring that the assessment method match the learning outcome. So previously we used learning targets. So this one we use learning outcome, is through ensuring that you stick to constructive alignment. You are making sure that your intended learning outcomes and your teaching and learning activities, as well as your assessment methods, are constructively aligned to one another. Okay, for example, here, the learning outcome would be demonstrate good presentation skills. So which type of assessment is the most appropriate to demonstrate good presentation skills? So that would be make a presentation to peers. So that is correctly aligned with the learning outcomes. For example, if you'd like to identify signs and symptoms of MS, multiple sclerosis, in a patient, so what type of assessment method that we like? So identify signs and symptoms. So that would be multiple choice questions. Okay. If it's to identify an area for research, that would be prepare a 1,000-word research proposal. If it's about formulate food product, so it's going to be a lab-based project. Okay. So there are two different ways of ensuring that your assessment method suits the learning targets or the learning outcome. Okay. All right, next slide. Okay. This is a zoom in on the context of a primary or elementary education context. It is school-based assessment, or in Bahasa Malaysia we say it as pelaksanaan. We say it as pentaksiran bidik darjah, PBD. Okay, in English we call it school-based assessment. Okay. Okay, school-based assessment, there are different components to it. The first one is to develop assessment measure, to create experiences leading to outcomes, discuss and use the results of the assessment to improve learning, and the first one is to formulate intended learning outcomes. Okay. Now, school-based assessment is to incorporate different people in the assessment process. It can be the teacher, it can be the parents, it can be the peers, okay, the students. It also determines learning outcomes to support and motivate students, and it allows students to get support and enhance learning in class and from home. And lastly is to help identify development of academic and working skills, and all of it, okay. And the four features is to ensure that it is a comprehensive, systematic, continuous, diagnostic, and integrative teacher-directed assessment procedure. Now, there are many characteristics of school-based assessment. It involves the teacher from beginning to the end. It collects a number of samples of students' performances. Students are more active, identify, and we have a range of suitable assessment tasks, and it is conducted by the students' own teachers, and it stimulates continuous evaluation and adjustment of the teaching and learning. So there are many reasons why we conduct the school-based assessment. First is to make sure to what we call it, to separate the word assessment from pressure. Okay, we want the students to feel less pressure during assessment. We don't want them to feel stressed, so much stress about assessment. Okay, we want to improve the reliability of assessment. We want to reinforce students' autonomy and independent learning, and we want to reduce reliance on one-off public exam, meaning that we want to reduce our reliance on assessment of learning, the very high-stake national standard exam. And we want to reflect the actual abilities and standard of the students and allow immediate and constructive feedbacks. Okay, these are the steps to conduct school-based assessment. First is to identify, to study the curriculum. Okay, we need to know what are the learning outcomes, what are the intended learning outcomes, what are the school priorities, okay, and the context for learning. And then we need to design, or we need to formulate learning. We plan the learning experiences, and we ensure whatever teaching strategies that we are about to employ, we are about to implement, is it would correspond to the students' needs. Okay. Next is to design the assessment. Okay, the one that I have been talking about in earlier steps on how best to design assessment according to targets, according to constructive alignment, and making judgment. And lastly is to use the results of the assessment and communicate it to the students in terms of feedback, and provide the feedbacks in a timely and understandable manner to the students. Okay, now, in Malaysia, we have a sort of a very complex way of assessing our students. In Malaysia, assessment can either be broken down into academic assessment or non-academic assessment. In academic assessment, we have the centralized assessment. Centralized assessment is where it's more, it reflects more on a national standard examination. And to complement that, to complement the assessment of learning, we have in-school assessment. In-school assessment.
Yeah.
Oh, all right, okay.
Yeah.
In school-based assessment, okay, so for non-academic, we cover about physical, sports, curriculum, and also psychometric assessment. So this is how SBA is done in a Malaysian school. And these are several types of principles with regards to school-based assessment. It is specifically designed for by the teacher for her or his own students. And it focuses on individual development, it requires follow-up actions, feedback, and it encourages self-assess and peer review. Okay. And there are many different skills to assess when it comes to school-based assessment. You can assess skills, kinesthetic, language, learning. You can also assess knowledge, attitudes, creativity, health, and intelligence. So I think this will be my last slide. All right. Thank you very much. Credit to Dr. Khairul and also, as I said, Professor Dr. Faradila for their contribution of the slides. All right. Okay, should I unshare this slide presentation?
Stop share and the top up.
All right. Okay. All right.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Nur Parahim Nasri. Okay, I think nice presentation about learning assessment. Okay, all right. Now we'll move to question and answer session. If you want to ask question, please raise your hand and say your name. And the other hand, you can write your question in the chat. Yeah. Okay, please. Okay, while my student give a question, Dr. Nur Paradila, could I discuss with you? Yeah, interest about your topic and the school-based assessment in Malaysia. Yeah, for your presentation, school-based assessment in Malaysia, academic and non-academic. So I want to focus on the academic and school assessment. What the implementation school-based assessment in Malaysia, especially in the elementary school assessment in Malaysia. Thank you.
All right. Okay. So initially, we have a very long history of assessment in Malaysia. We used to have a national standard examination where year 6 students will sit down and go through exams at the same time with the same sets of questions. However, as we progress through, we start looking at different alternatives to it. So that is when we start having a school-based assessment in Malaysia. I think it starts around 2014, 2016. So initially, the reaction is not really positive, especially because educators, teachers are very dependent on having national standard questions to assess their students. And we don't have much positive reviews from parents as well. Perhaps because they do not understand how the results of school-based assessment can help improve their students, can help improve their children's learning, and they don't understand on how best to interpret the results of school-based assessment. So usually the national standard examination, we call it as UPSR, we have it in grades. We have it from A to F, A, B, C, D, E, F, F. But in school-based assessment, we don't use that grading. We do not use A, B, C, D, E, or even fail, but we use TP. Yes, the TP is a scoring scheme, is a scoring grade where it really directly tells you how the students are doing in terms of their skills acquisition and mastery of knowledge. For example, TP1 until TP6. So students with TP6 are those students that master the knowledge and skills at a very sufficient level. Okay, so that is the most the target that all teachers would like for every students, but there are students that would achieve TP1 or TP3 or TP5 would be great, TP4 would be great. So the change of the grading is something that is quite concerning because not many people would understand it well. The teachers understand it well now. So the teachers are very positive about school-based assessment, but the parents are still not aware how the TPs are being graded. They are still not, I would say, they are still in the mind of thinking about A, B, C, D. They are not changing their mindset into TPs. So that is very difficult in our Malaysian schooling system. So I think more emphasis is needed to educate our parents about it. But I think school-based assessment is doing great in Malaysia because it supports a lot of different skills and different talents that the students have these days. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Nur Farahid. Okay, in the chat, Mbak Melinda Suryandari, ya. Hi, I'm Melinda. Would you mind elaborating about ipsative assessment?
All right. Okay. Ipsative assessment. Okay. Ipsative assessment, or what David Bout say, is David Bout's quote, sustainable assessment. Okay. Instead of using the word ipsative assessment, he used the word sustainable assessment. Both concepts are pretty much very similar, just that ipsative assessment is introduced in the late 1990s, and sustainable assessment is introduced around beyond 2010. So ipsative assessment is a very complex, very demanding as type of assessment where the teachers need to really know about the strengths and weaknesses of each student. So that is very difficult because each student has their own strengths and weaknesses, and each student has their own different standards or expectations about themselves. It becomes even more difficult in these days because we are no longer streaming our classes. what do I mean by streaming classes is that we are no longer gathering excellent students in one class. We are no longer gathering low performing students in one class. There are mixture of them in one class. So when we have different standards or expectations of each student, effective assessment will play its role in ensuring that the progress for each student is in accordance to his or own personal progress. For example, if you have student that is really doing well in terms of in terms of achieving the intended learning outcomes, so we know that these students will master, for example, writing 2 paragraphs of uh, of Mandarin in Mandarin. So we are also expecting the students to progress in additional 2 paragraphs for the next week for that particular student. Okay, so that is effective assessment. But when it comes to another student, that student may not even write a full sentence in Mandarin in 2 weeks. So what sort of expectations that we need to design so that the students can track the progress of the second students so that it meets his or her own standards. Okay? Is it clear?
Okay, thank you, Dr. Nurparahim. But Melinda, how about you?
I see, thank you.
Oke, thank you. Jadi intinya di penilaian IPSATIP ya, in bahasa Indonesia ya, itu alat ukur untuk menilai skala yang memaparkan respon ya, karakteristik dari individu ya, sebagai deskripsi perbandingan gitu ya, bahasa Melayu. Oke, thank you. Next, any else? One more maybe? Nothing? Okay, because time is over, Dr. Nurparahim, my time schedule 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. in Indonesia, so no 3 p.m. Okay, it's okay. Okay, time is over. Now, please open your camera. Please take a picture together. Mbak Deka. Hello, Mbak Deka. Pak Riyadi, I'm sorry, Pak Riyadi. Pak Riyadi will closing to the seminar, Pak Riyadi. Masih ada Pak Riyadi ya, Mbak Deka ya? Halo, Mbak Deka. Mana orangnya? Oke, ini take picture-nya siapa nih? Mas Fajar aja, Mas Fajar. Dikasih aba-aba Mas Fajar ya.
Mohon maaf, ini saya pakai gawai itu, Bu.
Oke, pakai gawai. Oke, ya.
Mohon maaf, Bu Marmoah, tidak bisa, monggo Bu Marmoah saja yang menutup, tidak apa.
Berapa Pak Ari?
Langsung ditutup Bu Marmoah saja, tidak apa.
Oh, dia Pak Ari matur nuwun ya. Oke, nggih, on kamera nggih, saya yang mengabadikan, oke. 1, 2, Mbak Rahmawati ya. 1, 2, 3. Oke. Next slide. Ini ada 2 slide ya. Oke, ini masih banyak yang off kamera. Mbak Laila, Mbak Parmini, Mbak Siska, Mbak Nisha, Mbak Ongke, Mbak Ayu, Mbak Rendita, please open kamera. Yuk, Mbak Hilda, Mbak Ica, Mbak Mas Amin, Mbak Diah, yuk open kamera dulu. Slide, ini ada slide kedua, Mbak Aderisma. Oke. Ya. 1, 2, 3. Oke, the last slide. Masih banyak, Mbak Siska, halo. Mbak Ayu Fitri, Mbak Tia, Mbak Vitalia, Mbak Delia, Mbak Twira, yuk. Ini masih banyak yang belum on kamera, oke. 1, 2, 3, oke. Oke. Ya. Oke. Ya. Oke, thank you. Dr. Nurparahim, thank you so much for your time and for your students. I'm sorry, I found you everywhere in here, but now that I call Dr. Nurparadila and I call to Dr. Amelia, I told please call her, please call you. So I'm sorry, because I didn't have your phone number. Okay.
No problem.
Yeah. Okay, my student or of the teacher, Honorable Dr. Riyadi, MSc. He is in the head of Magister Study Program, Elementary School Teacher Education. Dr. Nur Parahim Nasri, thank you for your time, for your presentation. I think nice presentation today from this session and the seminar. My study program, we all the lecture, hopes collaboration with you for the next time. For example, research collaboration in research, collaboration in maybe joining article, writing article together in the reputable journal, team teaching, and like today in the seminar. And next time maybe my study program will go to your university too, and the University Kebangsaan Malaysia. The lecturer and the student too. So my dean, my vice of dean, the Faculty of Teacher Training Education, say hello with you. So thank you so much. My heart of the Magister Study Program, thank you so for you. And say hello for your the dean, the new dean, the last time your dean, Professor Dr. Nur Azah, so we have invited twice in the international conference in the ICLIC, and then we have visited her too in the UKM 5 years ago maybe. So the next time I hope my university, Universitas 11 Maret, especially my study program, Magister Elementary School Teacher Education, can make collaboration with you, especially and your faculty and the University UKM too. Okay, thank you, Dr. Nur Parahim. If you want to close statement, please.
All right. Thank you very much and to all of you for listening to our slides, to our presentation for the past 2 days, I think. And yes, do come to UKM and collaborate with us. We have a lot of programs ready for different students' needs, and I think we can have a very joyful time collaborating with each other. And I really wish all of you students have a very meaningful, successful learning experience at Universitas 11 Maret. If you'd like to come to Malaysia, do come to UKM, and especially Faculty Pendidikan, Faculty of Education. We can have a discussion about it, and hopefully we can have a further positive collaboration in the near future, perhaps. All right. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Nur Parahim. Okay, everyone. Me as a moderator today, I apologize if I have mistake for the seminar today. And then one more, thank you, Dr. Nur Parahim. Say hello, coming from Indonesia, from Surakarta. Please come here next year, maybe or this year. Thank you so much. Okay, wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon.
Waalaikumsalam
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
All the
Terima kasih.
students.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Mama bilang thank you.
Ya,